You're looking good, and it feels good to be with you today. This is News with the Eye of Faith, and I am Kendall Bryan Hunter, and I'm author of this book, Consider My Servant Job. I have another stream where I talk about more religious-oriented topics, go through the Come Follow Me lessons. But for this podcast, I will be covering news from the perspective of Christ and the doctrine of Christ. And today's theme is misdirection and short-term thinking. Item number one in the news: Joe Biden is still president. I bring that up. This is misdirection. It's decoy. And it also explains why the Democrats have so much energy right now, is that we all agree that Joe Biden's brain is a bowl of soggy Fruit Loops. That is why he withdrew from the race, why Kamala Harris is replacing him. But what happened is that the Democratic Party demanded that the loyalists and the average members of the Democratic Party live in denial about the mental state of President Biden. Once he withdrew, they could finally have an honest conversation about things. They could finally tell the truth. And that's what's causing this emotional release right now, this euphoria. Is they're finally not so much attached to Kamala Harris, although she does fit all the DEI checkboxes. Although I'm from Oakland, and running on a platform that you're from Oakland, that's not a good thing. This city is a Mad Max scenario. But once they could finally tell the truth about Biden, there was an emotional release. And that's where all this euphoria comes from. So it's part of the DEI checkboxes, but the release, they're stopped lying to themselves about President Biden. So what's going to happen if the vice president ever starts doing interviews? Because she talks either like a kindergarten teacher or she gets really vicious. We have 3 months to the election. Has she been vetted as a president? As a vice president, sure, and that's implicit. If you're a vice president, you're also running for president if it ever happens. But no. Let's look at some of her policies. She said that she wants to put price controls on. Now, price controls always create shortages. Watch this. This is a Gemini chatbot. So let's get the volume up. Our price control is a good thing.
Price controls can be a complex issue, and their effectiveness depends on various factors. While they can have some short-term benefits, they often lead to unintended consequences that can outweigh the positives. Here's a breakdown of the potential advantages and disadvantages.
Well, you heard that from your chatbot. The chatbot doesn't think they're a good idea. Price controls cause scarcity cause shortages because prices reflect the scarcity. Gold is scarce, so the prices are high, so we use it with much more wisdom as opposed to pieces of paper. Having price controls to create prosperity is a bit like turning your thermometer upside down because it's too cold and you want things to heat up. Kamala Harris on the borders. Well, we vet entrance into the temples and into the church. We have interviews, but do we have that for borders? Here's an article to the New York Post about her dismal border record, about her being the border czar and then lying about it. Harris has a tax plan. What does the Book of Mormon teach about taxes? The Book of Mormon, you remember that? We're studying it this year. What does it have to say about taxes? You can do a keyword search on it. She wants to tax unrealized gains. Now, what unrealized gains are is, let's say you have money invested in the stock market. So you have a portfolio that's valued at a certain level. However, until you sell the stock, it's unrealized gain. So in essence, she's taxing imaginary money. You have to pay with real money, but she's taxing imaginary money that you don't quite have. Your stocks, it's an escrow technically, it's a type of escrow. So you don't have control over it until you sell it. But she wants to tax it before you sell it, before you actually get the money. Speaking of that, let's see. Speaking of the stock market, we had a bump a couple of weeks ago. For me, my 401k is completely recovered. My personal portfolio is still struggling a bit, but these snags happen all the time. So the DNC happened. You had billionaire Oprah Winfrey, her net worth is $3 billion, spoke, and she said this: "I've seen racism and sexism and income inequality and division. I've not only seen it, at times I've been on the receiving end of it." That statement is 100% correct. It's going on there. Income inequality is going on there. It talks about that in the Doctrine and Covenants, which we'll discuss next year. And she has been discriminated against as a woman and as a person who's black. But man, take a look at her mansion. And if there's income inequality going on and discrimination, how did she get that big mansion? You had Bill Clinton spoke. Bill Clinton, his net worth is $241 million, and he's the second impeached president. So at the DNC, you had a billionaire and you had an impeached president speak. No mention of Monica Lewinsky. At the DNC, you had both Michelle and Barack returned. Michelle, no mention of her school lunch program. #thanks Michelle, and no mention of President Obama's projects, the failures of Obamacare. You remember Benghazi, Hillary Clinton. At this point, what difference does that make? And then also no talk about his warrantless drone strikes, that he had killed people with drones without getting a warrant to do that. In 3rd Nephi chapter 6, the governor, or there are people who are killing prophets without the warrant from the government, imposing the death penalty, and this brought down the Nephite civilization. We'll get that in a few weeks. So, yeah. Did you forget all this stuff? Did you forget Benghazi? Did you lose your health care under Obamacare and you had to go to a vet to get penicillin? Now, here's a persuasion point. So they had Bernie Sanders, Oprah Winfrey, the Clintons, Bill and Hillary Clinton on different days. And then he had Mr. and Mrs. Obama speaking, and he had Harris. And that's called list persuasion. Okay, if you like Clinton, you like the glory days of Clinton, minus the Lewinskys and that cigar. If you liked the Obamas, you like Oprah Winfrey. Oh, and then you have Kamala Harris in there. It's called list persuasion. You make a list of things people like, and you throw a last thing on the bottom, and just by force of habit, they'll just go along with it. They have the emotional connection. It's a bit like that joke. Say the word apple, apple, apple. Okay, now say banana, and the person says apple. It's the same process, but you get the emotional connection. Harris, in her acceptance speech, she essentially announced she is running against two people. She's running against Donald Trump, but she's also running against herself, the current administration. Don't forget that. It's misdirection. Also at the DNC, they have a Planned Parenthood is offering free abortion and vasectomies at mobile clinics. Now, this wasn't sponsored by, they just happened to be there. So what's it about the Democratic Party where they like vasectomies and abortions? Now, as the church always says, some principles compatible with the gospel may be found in various political parties, and members should seek candidates who best embody those principles. Some principles, but not all. You got any question, please reread the Family Proclamation. If you have it on the wall, just sit there. That's that's kind of funny. The people who have it on the wall, but they just vote against it, and just compartmentalizing. Put the Family Proclamation up, cry when we talk about it, and abortionaholic. Handbook update. Speaking of abortions and vasectomies, the new handbook got updated. They cover garments, and Elder Holland talks about in this current Liahona, and talks about sealings, which Elder Carpenter talked about in his talk, Fruit That Remains, answering questions about that. And sort of the answer is, do the best you can. We don't know, and God's going to have to sort some things out in ways that we can't explain right now. We can't come up with a policy for everything. A big thing was a lot about transgender individuals. Now, keep in mind what the tactic was is to get same-sex marriage. Now, they got it. They had all this energy momentum. The next thing is dealing with transgendered people. Now, after transgendered people get the same status, what's going to be the third tactic? Think about that. Make your guesses. So what the church says is that, you always love people. However, you start doing social transitioning, such as using pronouns or dressing a certain way. You get put on church discipline, or church, I should say church membership restrictions. Is interesting. I think it was last year, maybe it was earlier. I think it was last year. They during sacrament meetings, sometimes in Utah, you get people who hop from ward to ward and hijack a testimony meeting. And we had a cross-dressing individual bear their testimony. And but the issue is that you don't know their membership status, and the reason why they're in our ward is because back in their home ward, they probably had restrictions on, and this is hopping to another ward was a way to get around that. But some people just need the psychology of hijacking the pulpit. So people, by gender, they mean the sex you're born with. And then they have a section dealing with people with who are intersex, such as Klinefelter's disease. But people can have any calling. The bias is to give them a calling. However, they can't have one that's sex specific. So a man can't serve as Relief Society president. We don't ordain trans male individuals to the priesthood. They cannot teach classes, of course, because of the doctrinal issues, and then they can't work with children. So no drag queen story time. Although you can have a drag queen sealing session if you're so inclined. So that's up with the church handbook updates. Short-term memory thing again. It's been 1 year since we had Rich Men North of Richmond. You remember that song? Well, give it a replay as we're going into this election. And I'd like to conclude with a life hack. And this is a life hack. Have a strategy. And here's a lesson from the U.S. history. When they had the Constitutional Convention, James Madison did a whole lot of reading, and he showed up to the convention with a plan that we called the Virginia Plan. Now, this wasn't a fully written constitution, but it was a piece of paper with a bunch of bullet points on how things should work. And this bullet point list that he had was the basis for the Constitution. He's really the father of the Constitution. And the lesson is that if you have a plan, you win. But behind that, you need to have a strategy, which is a plan. When you go into a situation, you think about it with, first of all, just doing your daily planning. A budget is a strategy where you have a plan on how to spend your money, and that's the key to prosperity. Serving in a church calling, disciplining your children, what's your strategy for that? Do you have a one-size-fit-all, just shouting at everyone? Or do you adapt it to the type of temperament that your child has? Planning a date, a married date, or a single date. You need to have a strategy. Also with meetings, an agenda is a plan, just like what James Madison had. He had a game plan, and you have a game plan for the meeting and make sure people are sticking to it. You send out the agenda beforehand so people have a chance to look at it. And when you show up, you're bound by that agenda. That's your strategy. So here's the key. Always have a strategy, always have a game plan, and then you will win. And that is news with the eye of faith.